North Korea's acts of belligerence continue with threats of war as the regime defines South Korea as a hostile state, calling on its troops to treat those in the southern part of the peninsula as enemies, all amid rampant reports that North Korean soldiers are joining their Russian counterparts in the war against Ukraine. Hope your work week is off to a good start. You're watching Press Perspective for this Monday, which is the day for our weekly rundown on matters of defense and diplomacy involving South Korea. Now, as has been the case in recent times, North Korea's acts of belligerence have been the cause of regional and broader concerns. For more on this, I have Cheon Soram, a reporter for U.S. broadcaster Radio Free Asia here in the studio. Soram, welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
I also have Professor Choi Hyun Jin at Kyung Hee University live on the line. Professor Choi, it's good to have you on.
Glad to see you.
Right, Soram, we'll start here in the studio. Now, there have been a number of disturbing developments here on the Korean Peninsula in recent days. Starting off with North Korea's accusations of South Korean drone incursions. We've also had North Korea's detonation of land links to South Korea, as well as North Korea's designation of South Korea as a hostile state. Let's start off with the allegations of drone incursions. Soram, what has been shared by the two Koreas with regard to this contentious matter?
So on October 11, North Korea accused South Korea of flying unmanned drones to North Korea, dropping anti-regime flags over Pyongyang 3 times earlier this month. North Korea's foreign ministry said it's a threat to their national security and it violates international law. So they demanded that South Korea should stop these actions, warning that if it could lead to armed conflict or even a war. They also made it clear that if it happens again, there will not be another warning and they will act immediately. Along with the statement, they released photos of a drone they claim they have captured. Then South Korea fired back, saying they didn't send any drones there. There is no proof that their military was involved. In return, South Korea's defense ministry warned North Korea that if they harm any South Korean citizen, the North would be facing the end of its regime. Meanwhile, South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff said they couldn't confirm whether North Korea's drone claims were true or not. And last Saturday, North Korean authorities insisted they found the drone remains in Pyongyang, claiming it is the same type used by South Korea's military.
Right. And now, Professor Che, as Soram mentioned, and also according to CNN, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff did not, and I quote, confirm nor deny the accusations by North Korea. How do you, Professor Che, explain this ambiguous answer, if you will?
Yes, it is true. The South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff gave a very ambiguous response to North Korea. But I think there are a few strategic reasons. The first reason is the staying neutral helps keep the balance between diplomacy and military action with North Korea, which is often very unpredictable. So by not confirming or denying, the South Korea can avoid giving the North a reason to escalate tensions. So this approach also allows flexibility, giving South Korea more options to respond later, while avoiding pressure from international or domestic audience. And there's another reason. By not focusing too much on one incident, the South Korea keeps attention on larger security concerns, like North Korea's other provocation, such as sending trash balloons or dispatching troops to Ukraine war. So this shows that the situation is very sensitive, and a direct response could lead to unintended consequences and making things more unstable. So this cautious approach by South Korean Joint Chief of Staff shows how complicated the geopolitical situation is. And I think in such a fragile security environment, giving a direct answer could easily lead to unintended escalation. So I fully agree with this response from South Korean Joint Chief of Staff.
Right. But in the meantime, Russia, for its part, Soram, was very quick to place its weight behind North Korea, calling on South Korea to halt, and I quote, further provocations. What do you suppose are the broader implications of this stance by the Kremlin?
So Russia's recent statement highlights its growing military ties with North Korea. On October 14, Russia's foreign ministry spokesperson said South Korea should take North Korea's warning seriously and avoid escalating tension on the Korean Peninsula. Now, this statement came right after reports that President Putin submitted a bill to State Duma to approve a new partnership with North Korea. The agreement includes a mutual defense clause, meaning if one side is attacked, the other will step in for defense. As Russia seeks support for its war in Ukraine, the military relationship between Russia and North Korea continues to enhance. And there has been talk about North Korea taking a more direct role in Ukraine. RFA recently interviewed a Ukraine journalist who reported on North Korean troop presence in Ukraine on October 4th. She mentioned that along with her sources in Ukraine, military intelligence and citizens she spoke to have confirmed seeing North Korean soldiers in Ukraine.
Right, and staying with this, Professor Choi, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has raised much concern about the participation, that is, of North Korean soldiers in Russian warfare against Ukraine. Now, speaking as a scholar, Professor Choi, how should the international community respond?
So if it is true that North Korean troops are helping Russia in Ukraine, the international community must take strong actions, I believe. The first, more sanctions should be applied to both North Korea and also to Russia. And this will help limit their ability to work together on military issues. And additionally, we need to provide more military aid to Ukraine to counter this new threat from both countries. And another focus should be on preventing North Korea from gaining advanced weapons technology from Russia. North Korea might be looking for missile or other nuclear technology, including submarine technology, in return for their support. And that could make things worse for global security, especially on the Korean Peninsula and in greater Asia-Pacific region. So I believe that the international community, especially the United States and its ally, should use diplomatic pressure to break the Russian-North Korean alliance. And by cutting off their cooperation, we could push Russia towards seeking more peaceful solution in Ukraine without relying on Pyongyang. So these actions would not only defend Ukraine, but also prevent North Korea from gaining advanced military capability. And lastly, taking this action would send a clear message to the global community. That is, external intervention in the Ukraine war on the side of Russia won't be tolerated. And countries like North Korea cannot use this situation to improve their military actions. So this is what I recommend to the global community.
Right. And speaking about the global community, Soram, what are your thoughts on its efforts to rein in North Korea's defiant acts of aggression?
I think despite ongoing international effort, it seems difficult to avoid North Korea's aggression and its growing ties with Russia. However, there are some meaningful international efforts to moderate North Korea's provocation. For example, last Wednesday, the vice foreign ministers of the US, South Korea, Japan met in Seoul to discuss how to better coordinate in response to North Korea's actions. After the meeting, they issued a joint statement strongly condemning North Korea's continued aggressive behavior, including its nuclear and missile development bombardment, missile launches, and violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions. Also, last Tuesday, during a U.S. State Department briefing, a spokesperson addressed on North Korea's recent blowing up of its inter-Korean roads, saying the U.S. is closely monitoring the situation in coordination with South Korea and continues to urge North Korea to reduce tensions and come back to the dialogue table. On top of that, an EU spokesperson told RFA last Thursday that North Korea could face additional sanctions if it doesn't stop supporting Russia's illegal war. He hinted that the EU is ready to take further action if Pyongyang continues down this path.
Right. Now, Soram, also during the meeting, the trilateral meeting among the senior diplomats of South Korea, Japan, and the US, a new framework was announced to monitor UN sanctions on North Korea. Could you tell us a bit about that framework?
Of course. According to the South Korea's Foreign Ministry, 11 countries, including the US, South Korea, and Japan, will launch a new joint body to monitor North Korea's sanctions violation. The decision follows the dissolution of a UN monitoring body 6 months ago due to a veto from Russia. So the new group, called the Multilateral Sanctions Monitoring Team, or MSMT, is focused on ensuring accurate and ongoing reporting on how sanctions against North Korea is being enforced. Members include the US, South Korea, Japan, France, the UK, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The new body serves as a successor to the UN panel of experts on North Korea, which was disbanded in April. However, unlike the old body, it operates outside of the UN framework and does not report directly to UN Security Council.
Right, which is precisely why, Professor Choi, some have shared skepticism about this new monitoring mechanism. What are your thoughts?
Yes, it is true that there are some concerns about this new monitoring mechanism called MSMT, mainly because it doesn't have a UN mandate, and which could affect its legitimacy, especially with the countries like China and Russia not participating. And also, that's why some analysts and scholars, worry that this monitoring body, it can only produce some reports, but they are not able to act that implement this recommendation, because China and Russia still possess veto power in the United Nations. But however, I believe that this MSMT still has some potential. The United States, South Korea, Japan, and other countries, including Australia, have the power to monitor and also respond to sanctions violation effectively, even without the support from the United Nations. And one of the key strengths of the MSMT is its ability to produce clear and also reliable reports. And if this team can maintain transparency and accuracy, it can build trust among the global community. And even though it's not a part of the United Nations, its finding could still influence major decisions, such as especially in finance and trade relations with North Korea, because ignoring this recommendation might have some negative consequences. And in addition, the UN sanctions on North Korea are still active, so we must remember this fact. And this gives the MSMT a strong legal foundation to keep monitoring and enforcing sanctions, which is so important nowadays as North Korea's military cooperation with Russia are growing.
Right, for sure. And Soram, in the meantime, North Korea has also designated South Korea, as I mentioned earlier, as a hostile state. And Kim Jong-un has called on his soldiers to treat South Korea as an enemy state. Now, do you believe the recent spate of belligerent behavior by North Korea could be an attempt to perhaps seek some form of leverage ahead of the U.S. presidential election on November 5th?
Historically, North Korea tends to provoke when a U.S. presidential election approaches. This year, while they are taking a slightly different path, tensions on the Korean Peninsula are still on the rise. North Korea has been carrying out provocation in various ways. Just last Tuesday, they blew up parts of two inter-Korean roads, the Kyung Hee and Donghae roads. Then last Thursday, North Korea announced, as you mentioned, that its constitution now clearly defines South Korea as an enemy, as a hostile state. This is the first time Pyongyang has confirmed their basic law has been revised to define South Korea as an enemy. Back in December, Kim already mentioned about this change, defining inter-Korean relationship as those between two hostile states, saying that reconciliation and unification is no longer a goal. However, experts point out that North Korea issue is not a priority for the U.S. at the moment. The U.S. has a lot on its plate with their economic challenges, Russia's war in Ukraine, and the conflict in the Middle East, and so on. So with the U.S. presidential election is just 15 days away, there is growing interest in whether or not North Korea will continue its provocation.
Right. And Professor Choi, how do you care to explain North Korea's blatant belligerence in recent days?
Yes, so their actions and also their voices are very aggressive nowadays. But I think their recent aggressive move can be explained by both internal and also external factors. So let me begin from first from more internal factors. Kim Jong-un wants to strengthen his hold on power by using this aggressive behavior. By portraying South Korea as a threat, he can justify increasing military spending and also maintain strict control over the population in North Korea. And I think that this strategy helps unite the North Korean people against a common enemy, in this case, South Korea and the United States. And this sense of a threat can reinforce the Kim Jong-un's leadership inside North Korea. And the next, there are also more external factors as well. And North Korea may be trying to gain some leverage on the international stage, especially with the upcoming US presidential election in this November. So by escalating tensions now, they hope to become a priority for the next US administration. And they can also force the next the US administration to pay more attention to North Korea and possibly make some concessions in future negotiations with the United States. So they made some examples of this policy concession might be some lifting economic sanctions on North Korea. Additionally, North Korea's growing ties with Russia could be encouraging this aggressive behavior as well. And North Korea is now feeling supported by a major power like Russia. So because of this, North Korea might feel more confident in taking bold actions against South Korea and the global community. So this alliance between Pyongyang and Moscow could provide North Korea with military and also technological assistance, and this military aid could further embolden their position. So in general, the North Korea's aggressive actions seem to be a very strategic move to strengthen Kim Jong-un's internal control over the North Korean population, and also to gain external advantage, especially in the face of the upcoming US presidential election. So they want to gain some policy concessions such as lifting sanctions on North Korea.
Right, and staying with Professor Choi's theory then, Soram, this is an impromptu question, but do you suppose we can perhaps see some advances in easing tensions on the Korean Peninsula under a Trump administration?
So I did an interview with a few experts and some high-level North Korea defector, but they mentioned North Korea might prefer Trump over Harris because Trump and Kim had a history of had a meeting, so Kim has more preference to Trump, but then they pointed out that if there is no strategic move or preparation before the meeting, there will not be really practical. So that was the view of experts and high-level defector from North Korea.
Right, I see. Professor Choi, I should have asked you this earlier, but I'll ask you now. Given the concerns regarding potential North Korean troop involvement in Russia's war in Ukraine, do you believe that the time has come for South Korea to consider military aid to Ukraine?
Yeah, we have some non-lethal military aid to Ukraine already, but now, right, that's a very difficult question. So your question is, whether we need to provide some lethal weapons to Ukraine, right?
Right.
Right. So right now, we don't have a clear evidence that those North Korean soldiers are fighting in the battlefield within Ukraine. But if we receive an evidence that North Korean soldiers are actually fighting in Ukraine, then I think we need to consider providing such lethal weapons to Ukraine as well to maintain some balance of power during this Ukraine war.
Right. It really is a difficult question though, right, Professor Choi? Right. All right, then I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Professor, as always, thank you very much for taking my impromptu question and for your thoughts today. And Soram here in the studio, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right. Well, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.